That's right, we are back. It is episode 10 of Audacity to Velocity OKC show. I'm Nate Fisher. I'm the Director of Communications at the Greater OKC Chamber.
And I'm Kaylee Terracino, your Senior Marketing Manager. You may notice we're in a little bit of a different place today. This is not the Chamber basement.
No, it's not.
It is Coop L-Works. We're so excited to be on location for the first time. And later on in this podcast, you are going to hear from Daniel Mercer, one of the co-founders of Coop. We're going to hear more about their brewery, what they have planned for the future, and some fun events coming up as well. So be sure to stay tuned for that interview because you're sure to learn a lot.
Bingo bango. Yeah, and we'll also talk about some of the new things that we found, what we've been up to in Oklahoma City.
Just all the fun that we're having all the time.
All the fun that we're having all the time.
So much fun.
Lots of new things, lots of fun stuff. So let's just get right into it.
Well, first, we have to thank our sponsor.
Yes, we do have to thank our
Snack
sponsor.
Shack, the
Rick's
best
Snack
sponsor
Shack,
in all
that's
the
right.
world.
Located in the basement of the Greater OKC Chamber.
He did not provide this beer
He did
or
not.
this hard seltzer, but there are
correct.
lots of other snacks
Lots of
down
other
there,
snacks.
So
Yeah.
he's got lots of variety.
He invented self-checkout. It's basically the honor system, but generally it still works. Now, I do want to say, anybody who's possibly interested in sponsoring the podcast, Rick does not have the exclusive rights to be a sponsor of the podcast. So
you may just slide into our DMs a little bit.
Yeah, just putting that out there, so that's fine. But yeah, thank you, Rick, for sponsoring the podcast. We definitely appreciate it. So we're here at Coop Ale Works, and we're here with Coop co-founder Daniel Mercer. And thank you very much for taking the time to be with us today.
We're so excited to take this show on the road.
So excited to be out here.
On location, like real podcasters. I don't know what's happening. It's great.
Probably don't get the opportunity to drink beer on most of your podcasts.
Not often.
Anytime we get to do this during work hours is a good day in my book.
Yeah, there you go. That's a good thing. So we just wanted to start out with hearing a little bit about yourself and your journey. I personally am kind of into entrepreneur stories, startup stories. So I'd love to hear a little bit about how you kind of came to the point where you were thinking like, I want to co-found a brewery. What?
Yeah, it's a long train of decisions. So the origin story of the brewery is really three of us met kind of by circumstance here in Oklahoma City, and Mark had been a home brewer for several years and had been tinkering with the idea or the concept of what it would mean to really start a production brewery here in Oklahoma City. And there were a couple of brew pubs, but really no packaging breweries. And so we met actually at Lake Hefner one night at an event, and he started talking about craft beer and his homebrewing activities, and I didn't really drink much beer at the time. So, but I found the concept kind of interesting, and I'd watched the industry grow out of state a little bit and wasn't super familiar, but we carried on the conversation after we left there, and then all three of us, JD and Mark and I, started to kind of put our brains together in these kind of informal sessions at the bar and really started digging into the mechanics of starting a brewery. And but that really, what kicked it off was really sitting down with friends and coworkers to try to see if Oklahoma City or if consumers in Oklahoma City would even be receptive to craft beer. And Oklahoma City and Oklahoma and this part of the U.S. is really just has been historically a light lager market. And so started bringing beers in and having informal dinners, and that's kind of how the idea gained a lot of traction. And then we started homebrewing in the summer of 2006 in August. And really that was the kickoff, and we just put all of our time and effort into looking at other breweries and what they were doing well and what they were doing not so well, and trying to learn from people that we respected in the industry. So that was really happenstance for me, and my role at the time was really to help establish the core kind of business fundamentals and the financial picture and whatnot, and help raise money, build a business plan, financial structure, corporate structure. And that's what I'd been doing really for the previous 6 years or so of my career, pretty much all of my career up to that point. I'd worked in kind of a boutique venture capital firm, and then had gone over to the consulting side and was helping startup tech companies raise money from VCs. And so it was right up my alley, and it was a fun exercise, but I didn't really think I would ever have a long-term engagement or long-term place, other than a really minor stake and a really minor role. But here we are, 12 years later, 13 years later, in a completely different world. So yeah, that's kind of how we got off the ground. And we spent about 2 years planning and visiting other breweries, mostly in Colorado. We'd go to the likes of Great Divide and Left Hand and Odell. And, early on, we met some of those people, Eric and Dick at Left Hand, and Doug and his wife and his sister at Odell and really established some baseline fundamentals around what the industry meant to people and how positive everything was and really how engaging people were and how free-flowing ideas were, which is really strange coming from a technology and intellectual property money background. Things are always super secret. You're not sharing ideas, and this is my idea, and I'm not sharing it with anyone. So it was kind of interesting. And so that was that concept really, and that engagement of us looking at and working with other breweries still exists to this day. And we still, on any given day, I might call a brewery 600 miles or 1,000 miles away and try to find out something about their concrete reinforcement rebar sizing or something random.
Right.
It might be something about a piece of equipment or a recommendation or a process, and so we've tried to keep that engagement pretty fluid and also reciprocate as well here in Oklahoma with other startup breweries.
So what can you tell me about the history of the brand? Why did you choose the name Coop? Tell me a little bit more about that branding process.
So early on, we, all three of us had worked on farms as kids, either typically through family or extended family. And Mark had worked on a farm out west in western Oklahoma. I had worked on a farm up in Alva and Tacoma. And JD grew up on a horse farm, and his family owned a horse farm. And so the co-op was always this central thing in a small community, particularly a farming community. And so for me, at least, growing up in the morning with my grandfather in the summer, we would get in the car and we would drive 40 miles out to Tacoma from Alva. And on the way, we'd stop at the co-op in Tacoma, and that's where he got coffee, and that's where I got a piece of candy or a sausage biscuit or whatever. And it's just every farmer in town or in the region was kind of stopping in the morning to fuel up and then go on their way. And so much of what goes on in small farming communities is around the co-op. And it was always kind of fascinating to me seeing people and reliving some of those things. And so in the early engagement and kind of early process of naming the company, we thought about calling it Co-op Ale Works. And that idea stuck around for quite a while, probably 6 to 8 months in the early formative stages. And technically speaking, it was our understanding from our attorney at that point that unless you were operating the business as a cooperative, you can't call it a co-op. And that's pretty complicated. At the time, there were co-op wineries in Napa and in California, but when you look at that business model, it's really based on garnering 500 or 3,000 members of this co-op it's kind of early crowdsourcing essentially. And it's not true in the sense that most co-ops are designed to allow you to bring your product to market and more, with better economics and better pricing and things like that. But we weren't really bringing a product, so our members would have been investors, frankly. Keeping track of all those people did not sound like fun. We bantered around with it for a little bit and talked to a couple of the wineries out in California that were doing it and, started reading up and it sounded like a nightmare. And so we had the opportunity to become the first co-op brewery in the U.S. and we didn't do it, which may have been a missed mark, but I don't think any of us really regretted it. And so as we were moving along, and Black Star Co-op actually in Austin became the first co-op brewery about 2 years later, I believe. And so, we just started bantering around with more names, and then as we were on a trip to Colorado looking at a barrel aging program and a brewery, the Cooper is the barrel maker essentially, or the Cooper Smith, but mostly call him a Cooper. And so started thinking about the Cooper and the kind of background of the co-op and the 4 letters and how simple they were. And so that's kind of where it evolved from, really. We just thought, we're just going to shorten Cooper and have kind of a visual reference and an homage to the co-op. So,
right.
And people come in here all the time and anywhere that we sell beer, and you'll hear Co-op Ale Works all over the place.
I'm sure
Does not offend anyone.
It sort of works for you.
Yeah. It allows you to get in and tell the story, which is pretty convoluted, frankly. It's not real clear. So the anvil is, a reference to the barrel maker and the smithing side of barrel making. So.
Okay, very cool.
That's really cool.
Well, and you also mentioned kind of the overall supportive nature of craft brewing in general,
Sure.
and kind of how that's, there's a distinction there between, this industry and a lot of other industries. I'm interested to hear, you guys were probably the first kind of craft production brewery that I know of in Oklahoma City. I'm curious to hear kind of your thoughts on where the industry has come, you know, in those 11 years, and where do you think it's going in the future?
It's come a long way. There was a small brewery in Capitol Hill at the time that was a packaging brewery, Hubert's, and it's gone now. But other than Hubert's and the brew pubs here in Oklahoma City, there wasn't really a production brewery, and that was always our goal. And so oftentimes people will ask, well, did you expect the brewery to get this big? Well, we didn't really get into it as a hobby. You know, we got into it as a hobby, you know, as a foundation, but really our goal was always to build something pretty significant and substantial. And so, you know, when we started, we were the third brewery really outside of Hubert. You know, from a production manufacturing brewery standpoint, we had Chalk and Krebs outside McAllister, and Marshall had about a 9-month head start on us in Tulsa.
Okay.
And so we kicked off, and you know, we had a little 5,000 square foot building that we built out. A brewing system in the back was really a collection of hodgepodge used equipment and some really dangerous things and some new things, but mostly really dangerous old things. I mean, we had tanks in there that were made in the early 70s.
Oh, wow.
In England. So
okay.
Our brew house was Ska Brewing's first brew house, if you're familiar with them, from Durango.
Okay.
But the brew house itself was made in 1989. Pretty much, it was made by a guy named John Cook, who made these things in his garage, basically. And the craft brewing space was very infant at the time. And so we had this little bitty building, and we had underpowered air conditioners. We didn't have any air conditioning in the back of the house, and we built a lot of it ourselves, kind of a lot of the systems and plumbing and things like that. But that's how we started, and we always had a focus and a desire to make quality and consistency at really the forefront of everything we've done historically. And you know, early on, frankly, we were just lucky. I mean, our efforts, or our active efforts to maintain quality and consistency, were pretty minimal. You know, we always were diligent and tried to use consistent methodologies and processes, but as we look back on it now, having a full-blown lab and 2 full-time lab staff here, and all the tools and analytical and biological things that we use, looking back, we were just really lucky. But you know, since then, we've had now there are some almost 30 breweries in Oklahoma. There are probably, I would guess, or an educated guess would be that there are about another 10 in planning that'll launch in the next 2 years. There are a couple in early construction now, and so Big Friendly is an instance of one of those down in Wheeler Park. So the industry has grown tremendously, and early on, kind of not knowing what was going to happen, it was pretty much sink or swim, and our business launched with draft only, and so we were just exclusively looking at restaurants and bars, and we made a really big splash at the get-go, and being the first mover in the market obviously worked to our advantage, and being the first mover in the can space and bringing all of our products into cans 5 years later was a pretty substantial footprint for us. And despite the regulatory framework, I mean, you all have been around long enough to know that the beer landscape in Oklahoma is partially suppressed because you didn't have strong beer and grocery and convenience, and you just didn't have a regulatory environment that was really very fluid or it just didn't facilitate growth very well. And it's hard to grow a brewery without a tap room as well. And so you go to other states and you see these breweries that have these long stories, and they launched and they've got beautiful tap rooms and they have all this public engagement. Well, in a tap room, you have the ability essentially to fund much of your investment with high margin cash flow. And it's not a secret that when we sell a beer for $5 in the tap room, we make a lot more money off of it than we do selling it through the distribution channel and then through the retailer. And that's not to say that we have absolute respect and value for those players, but this allows us in its tiny little microcosm to generate some more cash flow. And so now the environment is super friendly, and it's economically conducive to go in and start an on-premise brewery with a decent-sized tap room and spend money on real estate in downtown, things like that. And so it has come a long way, and the consumer has changed dramatically, and we've been able to really watch our growth and actually not necessarily actively or strategically coordinate, but we do have partnerships in the food space, and the culinary scene in Oklahoma is just completely different than it was 15 years ago. And that is just it's just a dovetail into what we do. I mean, food and beer obviously go together.
Yeah,
so.
that's great. That's great.
So when we're talking about the future, you guys made an announcement that you're moving into the Armory space on 23rd. I think that was one of the biggest stories we had on Velocity at the time.
Yeah.
So people are obviously excited about this. What can you tell us about that project?
It is a big project and it moves slowly. Those are the first things to understand. So the Armory is the giant monolith that it is just west of the state capitol on 23rd. It's been vacant basically since about 2007, 2008. And I live nearby there, and for 3 years I drove to work by this building every morning. And we've always been looking to get back to the core of the city. It's always been part of our goal. We're here in the Western Heights area because we needed this building and the space, but we always knew that eventually we'd come back to the heart of the city, and it just wasn't really achievable at the time. So, but we've always had a plan to go back. So we've always been looking for property. We've always been exploring purchase options on dirt or old buildings. And if there's an older building that might have been suitable for the brewery, I have been through it in the past 5 years. I've been through dozens of buildings all over the city. But you need ceiling height, you need a lot of things that a lot of old buildings just don't have. And so driving by the Armory, you kind of start to look at the framework of it and the big bay windows at the top. And I just started to think, I think that big central portion is a giant atrium, and if it is, it's got ceiling heights that are 40, 50 feet high.
Yeah.
And so literally one day driving down the road, I just called our commercial real estate agents that do all of our real estate work, and I said, hey, I want you to call the state and find out what's going on with this thing. And that was May 7th, 2017. And so they said, we're going to put it up for an RFP on September 15th, and we're going to publish the RFP then. And so I just immediately started working on it then. And then I started digging into the history of the building and tried sizing it out with Google imagery and going on site and walking it out with measuring wheels. And we had a pretty good idea of what to expect when we first walked in the building. And we may or may not have been able to peek in through some open doors at times in the about 4 or 5 month gap between when they told us and when the RFP went live. And so we put a plan together over 6 months from September through March, and us and one other developer ended up submitting a plan. The building's pretty difficult to work with because of the atrium. And so every real estate developer and their friend were walking through the thing on September 15th, but at the end of the day, 6 months later, it was just us and one other developer. So made presentations, pitches to the selection committee. We ended up getting selected, and then we spent about 6 months navigating, okay, well, there are 13 acres here and a number of buildings, over half a dozen buildings. What do we want, and what exactly are we going to be required to have from a parking standpoint, and how can we move this boundary around, and what is the state doing with these individual buildings? And that took a while. And we got through that process, and now we're working through the legalities around the land. And so there are a lot of things that have to happen. The land, all the rights of way for the streets had to be removed and abandoned, and then the property has to be replatted based on the boundaries of exactly what we're acquiring through our purchase and our 95-year leases. And so we have about 8.5 acres, and the Armory building itself and everything right around it is a purchase that we'll own. And then there are 2 buildings on 23rd, one of which is being torn down, and then a parking section in the southeast space that are long-term leases, basically. So, and the scope of the deal grew tremendously over this time period as well. So over the past year and a half, as we've started to get into the building and start to design out spaces and look at flows and, well, what are we going to do with all this other space? And that's where the initial hotel concept came from. And that was part of the RFP to begin with, but was fairly small in scale. It was just, hey, we're going to put 30 rooms in the Armory building. We don't even think about these other buildings. But as we started looking at the boundary and the other buildings, it really became apparent that we had an opportunity to create a destination. And so as the idea grew, we started to think about the hotel and really how we could create a destination. That's really where the thing has morphed from, hey, let's bolt some hotel rooms into the brewery, to how can we build an amenity-driven and a destination-driven development that will bring people there and keep them there. And when you start looking at hotel destinations, I mean, what are the things that you want them to have? You want them to have food, you want them to have beverage, you want them to have a bar scene, you want them to have a pool, you want a gym. All of those amenities are available in this development. And so it's not that it's unique in offering those things. I mean, most hotels have those things, but in the setting and what it all surrounds, being the brewery, and that brewery being 100% visible in this this giant 22,000 square foot fishbowl that has stairwells and walkways all the way around it on the second and third floors. It's pretty amazing. I mean, you don't get the opportunity to stick something that's manufacturing and driven with stainless steel and moving parts and noise and things like that, and put it in such a beautiful building. It's really a unique opportunity and really unlike anything in the United States and we think the world, frankly. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very, very cool and very, very unique for sure. Yeah.
And the other aspect of it is that early on, we didn't really understand or know how we were going to run the hotel and the restaurant. There are a lot of options. As an owner, you can farm out the management, or you could farm out the complete operation of a restaurant or a hotel. But what we've realized over the past year and a half is that we want to control the experience, and we want it to mate well with the brewery. And so there are physical things inside the space that took us well over a year to just conceptually build and ensure that the flow of movement in the building was appropriate, and that the guests in the restaurant were going to have the same quality experience that the hotel guests were, and that there was the ability to really merge those visitors into some common experience.
Yeah.
So there's some physical things in the space that are really unique, and it'll outside the Armory building, you've got the villas, which there are 12 larger villas over east of the property, and there's a pool club there with a full-service bar out into the pool club and beer garden. There's a speakeasy underneath there that'll be a private event space.
Oh, that's exciting.
So for beer releases and all your stouts. So that'll be a great opportunity, and it's going to be kind of the really low level, low ceiling, dark, kind of woody space, if you will, on the property. So a lot of things will be bright and colorful, but it's also an armory, and the property is historic, and the historic tax credits and the preservation pathways allow us really to make the deal economically feasible, because we're talking tens of millions of dollars, and it's not cheap. But we also want to preserve the history of the Armory, not just the building, but what went on in there with the 45th Infantry Division. And so 45th has a very storied history in several theaters throughout the 20th century. So we want to, again, integrate some history there. And so we've been working with the 45th Infantry Division Museum and even the current infantry commanders and the military department and the Oklahoma History Center to really capture some of those things visually and experientially in the space as well.
Oh, very cool.
Frankly, inside, it's a bare bones building. You go into a lot of historic buildings that have beautiful ornate features and things, the grand staircases made of marble, and think about something like the coal court, the elevators and all the gilded metal inside. And there's nothing like that in the Armory. Because it was a utilitarian building. The military wasn't putting marble in the So there are a couple of kind of key visual elements that we're gonna basically renovate, but breathing new life into the building is really exciting, and it's having worked with the architects now for over 2 years, and civil engineers and structural engineers and all of the work that we've done, it's been pretty fascinating. It's been extremely challenging, but it's going to be a great project when we get finished.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So,
when do you guys think that you might begin?
I was afraid you'd ask me that.
I'm sure you get that a lot.
So pretty much every month we have a date in mind, and then it doesn't come to fruition. So there are a lot of things out of our control, frankly.
Always.
There are several things that are still being wrapped up with regard to the land and the title, and we're working through those, and some financial structural issues as well, and environmental things that all have to be remediated, and we have to set forth the plans to fix things. And so right now, if we could close in 90 days, then we would be open in September of 2021. So it's basically at whatever point we close, we can basically budget on 17 to 20 months, and ideally probably 18 months after that. And so like tonight I go to Planning Commission zoning meeting to approve the demolition permits for the facility, and so you got this giant 8.5 acre thing, and it sits inside the Capital Medical Zoning District, which is an underlay that the city doesn't regulate from a zoning and permitting standpoint, so they have their own committees and things like that. But we're moving along those processes kind of on parallel paths to ensure that once we're ready to close, we don't have any impediments really to really start swinging the wrecking ball and digging dirt.
Okay, very cool.
You're really exciting.
Yeah, that is.
But that's a few years away from now, but there's a lot going on here today. So are there any cool events or any upcoming things that people need to know about taking place at your brewery now?
So it's February, so we're always getting ready for our anniversary party in March. So the anniversary party is always the first Saturday in March. March. It's kind of centered around March 3rd, which is the day we sold our first beer at retail.
Nice.
In the old Speakeasy bar that was next to the original brewery. We used to do the party in January when we brewed our first batch of beer, but January weather is January weather. So we moved it to March. So it'll be March 7th this year, Saturday. And the sessions will be 11 to 3 o'clock and 4 to 8 o'clock. And we've had this party now for 11 years. The first year we made the mistake of just doing one big party in one session. And we had 5,000 square foot building and 1,200 people showed up.
Oh boy.
And you couldn't move. And so we have 2 sessions, and now we have more space. We have the backyard and all of this space in here. And we have other space elsewhere, so we kind of hollow out some things. But it's a great party. We'll have probably 30 to 40 beers on tap.
Nice.
And in package. And all of the all of the proceeds basically go to benefit the Oklahoma Humane Society. And so
awesome.
Humane Society has moved from really an Oklahoma City operation now to a statewide operation, and this is a big benefit for them every year. And in the past 11 years, we've raised over $150,000, and so probably expect to raise between 25 and 30 this year.
Fantastic.
Very cool.
So it'll be a great, good party for a great cause. So come along, and there won't be dogs to adopt, but you'll have plenty of opportunity to talk to the people here. They'll have displays and be able to show you dogs that are available and cats as well. So it's just a fun event, and we've got dancing and music and food, beer,
Very cool.
seltzer.
Seltzer. Yeah.
So
Well, yeah. So, and this is sort of a relatively new offering. The seltzer. You guys
It
are
is.
hopped on the seltzer train.
yep. So this is was actually just canned today. This is mango guava.
Wow.
Nice.
Will and Wiley. So the seltzer market is interesting. You know, it's not beer, very obviously, and you know, consumer tastes change. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, absolutely.
And not only do they change, they evolve. And you know, particularly as health conscious as people are these days, it's just another beverage opportunity for people to sync their consumption with their lifestyle. So we have this brand launching March 1st, basically, in a few weeks, and there'll be 4 flavors to start. We've got pineapple, mango guava, cherry lime, and grapefruit.
I love everything you're saying.
So they'll come in 6-packs, and then they'll also come in mixed 12-packs.
Awesome.
So you'll see
perfect.
those through grocery, convenience channels, and liquor channels all over the place, starting in March. Really pretty exciting development for us, and it's interesting to tinker around with new processes and new ingredients, and ultimately to create a new beverage category. Not to create it, but to play in that space. It's
Yeah.
really fun. So.
Well, and you guys do such a good job of just doing a lot of different styles really well, you know. And so, that being said, what's your sort of favorite coop brew that you guys do?
My favorite year-round beer that we make is definitely Native Amber. And I think just the complexity of all the malts and hops in that beer, and Native Amber was always a labor of love. When we were home brewing early on, we really focused on three beers: Grand Sport Porter, DNR, and Native Amber. We didn't even have names for them at the time, but Native Amber was probably the beer that we toiled over the most, and that we just worked so hard to pin down the flavor. Now, that was more than a decade ago. The beer that exists now in cans and on draft is completely different than it was. It's far better. We have professional brewers that have made it better. Our longtime head brewer and partner, Blake Jarlam, has made that beer really what it is today. So I can't really claim, I don't think any of the 3 of us that founded the company could really claim much part of that liquid. But that's my favorite beer year round. Rye wine, we make a rye wine, or historically we've made a rye wine once a year through the Territorial Reserve Series. That's a really great beer. And then on the seasonal basis, Fly Me Away is my favorite probably. It's a New England style IPA. That came out 2 years ago, and so it will come out again in April.
Awesome.
So-
Awesome. Yeah, that's my
Nate's
favorite.
marking it
Yeah,
down
so
on his
that's-
calendar
Yeah, that's
as
my
we
favorite
speak.
It'll
season.
come out in May. It's, it's the hot pink can. That one's great. And then, those are probably my favorite coop beers.
Okay, awesome. How about your favorite non-coop beer?
My favorite beer in the world is a beer, unfortunately, it's no longer made as of
no.
about 1.5 years ago, but it's called White Oak, and it's made by the brewery in LA, the Rue family, so they spell it B-R-U-E-R-Y. But they make a beer called White Oak that is an old ale, and it's just a fascinating beer. And I think for me, it is a great beer, and it is probably, flavor-wise, my favorite beer, but experientially, that beer, I've just got a memory of the first time I ever drank it, sitting in the backyard by the fire pit with my wife, and she had brought home some homemade lemon meringue marshmallows and white chocolate from a friend of hers, and we made these white chocolate s'mores.
Wow, that sounds amazing.
Drinking this beer, and it's just, man, something you can never replicate again.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's definitely my favorite beer of all time.
Yeah, that's going to be tough to beat.
And I pin them down every time I go out there and ask them about it. And they're like, well, we don't make that anymore because we can't use the name. Well, I don't care.
cares?
Call
Yeah.
it something else.
Yeah, rebrand. It's fine. I just need the
And they
beer.
haven't done it despite my my constant harping, so slightly disappointed.
Yeah.
But, so the tap room's open Wednesday, Thursday, Friday from 4 to 8, and then Saturday from noon to 8. And then we do have live music every Thursday, and including tonight. And when the weather's nice, we've got a backyard. It's about a half acre. You can take dogs out there. Picnic tables, food trucks on Fridays and Saturdays. So it's not a great day to go outside today, but
But it will be soon.
when the
Patio
weather's good,
coming. Yeah.
it's fun. Yeah, and the sunsets are beautiful. Just got unobstructed skyline over there. There's a lake on the other side, and cows, and it's just really pretty in the evening. So
Yeah,
it's a good time.
absolutely. Yeah, you guys, if you haven't been out here yet, you
Make
have
the
to come
trek.
check it out. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So thank you so much, Daniel, for having us here to experience this place and helping us learn a little bit more about Coop and all of the great things that you guys have ahead of you. We appreciate your hospitality.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming
Absolutely.
in. We appreciate you coming in so you can have more beer.
We're here for that for sure.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.
Okay, so Nate, what's going on in your world? What's new in Nate's Oklahoma City?
So one thing I did want to mention is that I don't know if you guys are avid readers of The Point, which is our monthly newsletter, which you should be. But
I wrote that thing for 5 years, so I hope all of you are dedicated readers.
we had a nice story about some of the new PR efforts that we are embarking on as a chamber, and as part of that, we actually got to go visit the Wheeler development a couple weeks ago and kind of check that out on person. And I know there's been a lot of talk. Of course, a lot of people know about the Ferris wheel and a lot of
The great hammocks.
and the great
It's a
hammocks
wonderful
and
part of the
and
Wheeler development.
Probably a little bit about the plans that they have for that area, but they've actually done quite a bit of construction lately on the actual housing and some of the other buildings that are going on, and so being able to kind of walk around in person, kind of on the ground, and kind of see what they're doing, it's a really, really cool development, and it was really, really nice. We got to talk to Ashley Terry, one of their marketing people, and she gave us a really good tour and kind of told us a little bit about the plans for that. And so we got a pretty nice write-up about the Wheeler development and what they have planned in Velocity recently. So we're going to have a link to that in the show notes that Molly Fleming wrote. So, we'll have
What
a
was
link to
one
that.
of the favorite things that you saw while you were on the tour?
Yeah, well, it was cool. Well, for one thing, I mean, we're in a brewery, so she was talking about the construction of a brewery that was going on there. So that
And that's the Big Friendly,
the
right?
Big
So
Friendly.
they currently have a bus.
They have a bus,
A beer bus?
right, that frequents the area. But yeah, they're going to have a permanent space there. But they have just a wide variety of different living options there. For all kinds of
Price
situations
points,
and price
sizes.
points. Yeah, and they have some live-work units that are really kind of interesting. Yeah, so if you are interested in possibly
Sorry.
having a retail
Got
shop,
distracted by the
there's
dog. There's a dog here, guys.
or something like that as part of your domicile, that would be an option for you. And yeah, it's just
It's a really
cool.
unique plan concept that I think
It is.
I think a lot of people in Oklahoma City are hungry for and will really flock to.
Yeah.
So it is fun if you haven't driven in the area, even just to drive by and see the houses and the developments that are currently under construction, some that are already done. It's pretty exciting to see
Right.
that area come back to life.
And some of the things that they have done in the past and are doing and continuing to do to just foster a real strong sense of community. With,
Lots of
with folks
placemaking
there.
stuff
Yeah,
happening there.
Exactly. So it was really cool. So be sure to check that out if you haven't seen that yet. So another article that we've had on Velocity recently is about the new Embassy Suites that is on Northwest Expressway.
That's right. I was just there this morning, so
Yeah.
that they were kind enough to host the Chamber's first joint Board of Directors, Board of Advisors meeting of 2020. So we had about 275 business leaders there this morning for a meeting where we heard from Dr. Sean McDaniel, the superintendent of Oklahoma City Public Schools. We heard from Tom McDaniel about MAPS progress, a bevy of speakers, kind of keeping people informed about what's going on in Oklahoma City. But I will tell you, I live in the area. I live pretty close to Embassy Suites, and it's so nice to see that hotel tower come back to life.
Right.
The event space was fantastic, and I know not everyone that lives listens or watches this show is in the event planning world, but if you are, you should check it out because they can actually hold, I want to say, about 800 to 900 people, which is a size of event venue that Oklahoma City kind of lacked.
Yeah.
So it brings a lot more options to the market. Great location, and of course, they're also hotels. So if you're looking for a place to stay, you can stay there too. They're building a McAllister's in the parking lot, so that'll add to some of the offerings around the hotel and event space. So it was really great for them to host us, and good to see what they've done with that facility.
Cool. Yeah, I've heard a lot of really good things. So we lost Russell's, but we gained so much more.
I know, that McAllister's, the sweet tea. Maybe it'll make up for it. We'll see. So, Nate, we've talked a lot on the podcast about places to go, our favorite places to eat, but what we haven't talked a lot about, this being February, Valentine's Day season, is your favorite romantic restaurants.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
So what do you think? Like, where are you going to take a date? If you have a date to go out with, where are you taking them this time of year?
One thing that always comes to mind for me when you mention, I don't know why, I don't know if it's particularly romantic, but an old favorite of mine is Sushi Nico. Western Concepts, their chamber member, I think, one of the first or original sushi restaurants in Oklahoma City, along with Tokyo, I believe. And but they just do a really good job, and I'm actually going to go there here this weekend, and I'm looking forward to checking it out once again. So it's a treat for me. It's a place I don't get to go to very often. It's a little bit out of my bubble. I have a very small bubble.
You do. This is probably the farthest you've driven your car in like 5 years.
That's probably about right. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm very impressed that you're going to drive out of your bubble for your weekend getaway to Sushi Nico in North Oklahoma City.
Yeah,
so congratulations.
Great job. So looking forward to that. For sure.
That's exciting.
How about yourself?
Romantic restaurants?
Yeah.
My favorite is Victoria's Pasta. Norman. But they also have a South Oklahoma City location.
Yeah.
So that's always my go-to. I love pasta. Can't say no to Italian food.
Pasta's hard to beat.
Yeah.
And Victoria's is hard to beat.
Victoria's is one of the best.
Yes, absolutely. Okay.
So what else is going on? I know we've got some exciting things coming to some Oklahoma City museums that you wanted to talk about. So anything of note that we should keep our eye on?
Yeah, a couple of things. So again, we had a really nice piece in Velocity about the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum's new exhibit that's entitled Warhol in the West. So something that you guys may not be aware of, but Andy Warhol, the Andy Warhol, was actually a fan of all things Western, and actually created a lot of Western themed art. He's known for a lot of different things, the soup cans and the celebrity photos and those kind of
pop art.
Pop art, yeah. But he also created a lot of art with the Western flair or Western bend, and so they've got a really nice exhibition right now at the Cowboy that you should check out. And so we've got a nice piece about that Kennedy Parker wrote on Velocity, so I'm going to have a link to that in the show notes, but you want to go check that out. The other thing that's cool that's in town right now is at the Oklahoma City Museum of Art, the Museum of Art downtown. They have an exhibit right now that's entitled Renewing the American Spirit, which is basically the art of the Great Depression. So all that WPA era art, they've got a really good selection of that kind of thing in their permanent collection. And they actually just recently acquired a really nice, more of a mural-sized piece that hadn't been shown publicly since, I believe, 1932, the President's Exhibition in 1932.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's George Washington themed. I've seen pictures of it, and it looks really, really cool.
That definitely seems worth seeing.
A lot of different styles of art in that time period as well. The Great Depression, so things weren't so great for a lot of people. So really, really cool exhibit, and so you guys should definitely go check that out if you can. Renewing the American Spirit. So that's going to be available through April 26th, and then the Warhol in the West at the Cowboy, that's going to be on through May 10th.
It's kind of hard to imagine. Like we're in the middle of February. We're approaching spring. It's coming.
Yeah, it's coming. I know.
It felt like January lasted for 5 years, but now we're solidly in the middle of February. We're almost to spring in Oklahoma City, which is one of the best times to be here. So I'd like to know, what's some of your favorite ways to experience spring in Oklahoma City?
Well, I'll tell you. Everybody knows.
He's going to tell me.
The weekend that of the Oklahoma City Memorial Marathon is one of the busiest in town, on a yearly basis.
Of course.
Right?
People say, you know what, let's add another event. Let's do one more. Let's keep people hopping all weekend long.
but I usually participate in the marathon in some form or fashion.
Every year he says he's not going to. Every year he runs an entire marathon.
Right.
It's bizarre. I don't understand it.
So that's a weekend that I look forward to just because of all the activity that's going on. You know, of course, you have the arts festival as well, and generally we've in the past, and it looks like this year we're also going to have some Thunder playoff basketball probably around that time.
We didn't expect it, and we're getting it anyway. It's the best kind of gift, so it's awesome.
So you never know. Lots of good things. The Dodgers are going to start their season soon. The Energy is going to start their season soon. So
that's right.
Lots of things to look forward to in terms of springtime in Oklahoma City. So.
That's so true. Yeah, the Festival of the Arts is one of the best events to ring in spring in Oklahoma City. And for those of us that work downtown and eat lunch, unlike Nate, I eat lunch. So I like to walk down there and have lunch every once in a while. Experience the art on my lunch hour. It's very fun.
Yeah. And are you going to perform at the Arts Festival?
I don't know. I'm not sure if we'll be able to, but you know, if they offer, I'll say yes.
Okay.
But I was going to mention too, you mentioned the Dodgers. They're actually having the national anthem tryouts for the Dodgers on March 28th. So they do something kind of unique where they have live national anthem tryouts. So you go to the field, you sing in front of a live audience, and then they choose the people who will sing the national anthem at the games this year.
Cool.
So I'm not doing it, but I was actually looking because I'd like to. I'll be out of town that weekend and can't. But we were looking, I'm in a quartet, and we were looking at trying out. But unfortunately, we won't be able to. So anyone that has, a national anthem talent should go for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's really unique and fun.
If that's been on your bucket list, you want to sing the national anthem at a sporting event, this may be your best shot.
No,
so.
I sang at the men's basketball game last night.
Oh, did you?
Yes.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
How was that?
It was fun. It was great. Yeah, it was a good time. So.
Awesome. Okay. Well, and I've heard your quartet do the national anthem before.
That's right.
So
we did.
You guys are fantastic. That's right. That's right.
So maybe one year you'll see it at the Dodgers. We'll see.
Very cool. I hope so. Yeah. Awesome. Okay.
Oh, well, we didn't mention, if you watched our podcast or listened to our podcast last week, we had Mike Knopp on talking about the Boathouse District. It's almost time for Whitewater to open again.
Spring break, right? That's when it opens.
I believe so, yeah. Spring break is when that will open. And obviously there are tons of ways to experience the great outdoors right at the Oklahoma River. I'm actually going to be back on the Chambers rowing team this year, so watch out, world.
Oh, watch out.
It's happening. Are you rowing with the Chamber?
I'm going to be a sub.
Oh my gosh. I'm very sad.
Yeah, I'm signed up to be a sub. So we'll see what happens.
Okay,
I haven't fully committed. The winter season kind of left me ragged, but we will see. We'll see. Springtime has a way of wanting to
get back on the water.
Get you back out on the water. So we'll see.
That'll be fun to get back on the water myself. I'm looking forward to it.
yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Congrats.
Thank you.
I'm glad.
Thank you. Thanks for congratulating me on doing nothing yet. So I appreciate that.
You have good plans though.
I have plans to do something.
Let's make this happen.
So Nate, tell me a little bit more. We've got spring break coming up.
Spring break is coming up.
To close. What are you going to do for spring break?
You know what?
Tell me everything.
I'm going to work.
Me too.
I'm going to work at my job.
Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 5. So exciting. Maybe 9 to 5:30. It depends on how early I get up that day. But, work.
How is it that the concept of spring break never actually made its way into the working world?
I kind of think we should all get a week off.
Right.
We should.
Yeah,
I know.
absolutely.
It's unfortunately whenever you don't have, children and time off of school, probably not going to do anything with it. There's a puppy down here. Sorry.
But if you do have kids.
That's right. We do have a resource for people who might be looking for spring break camps or any kind of activities for children. Check that out on abetterlifeokc.com. We always have a blog post about that every year, and we'll confirm with Molly Fleming to make sure we'll have one this year. So it'll be perfect.
I'm sure there will be some information on spring break camps and other things to do with your kids.
Tons of museums. The Oklahoma City Park System normally has some programming, the YMCA. So lots of resources if you are looking for a place for your kids to go have fun, burn off some energy, and maybe get out of the house for a week instead of being trapped inside for a whole week during spring break.
Absolutely. Get down to the river maybe. That's a good option.
That's a really good place to start for sure.
All right. Well, I think that about wraps it up for this edition of the Audacity Velocity OKC show. We thank you guys for joining us.
And thanks again to Coop one more time.
Thanks
We're
again
so
to Coop
glad that
for
we got
having
to
us
hang
out.
here
And to Daniel for taking the time to speak with us. We really appreciate it. We want to know, what do you guys want to know about? So, we talk a lot about, new developments and new things that we found. Is there anything in particular that we're missing that you guys would like to hear about it? Please, please let us know. There are a couple ways to give us feedback. The best and the easiest way is just to email us. I know it's boring, but just to email us. And that is...
Don't neglect that email.
That's right. networking@okcchamber.com. If you prefer the social media, our chamber social media handles are generally at OKC Chamber.
And we so appreciate everyone who who is watching and listening to this show, if you're a fan, please let us know. Leave us a rating, leave us a comment, or leave us a review. That helps other people find us. And
hit the little bell on YouTube so you get the notifications.
That's what all the cool kids say, is ring the bell.
Ring the bell. Ring that bell.
But yes, we absolutely appreciate any feedback that you have to give us about Audacity, and we appreciate you coming back for more every time we post. So
that's right. All right, so we will see you guys next time. Thank you.
Bye-bye.